Okay, so for your value scales, you're going to use the scales that you laid out in the previous module. Okay, so this is the scales that we laid out that were 9 inches wide by 1 inch thick, right? Separated into inch squares with the space between. We don't need the row label, so we're going to get rid of that before we get started. And then I want you to label your scales. Smooth transition value scale at the top. The middle value scale is going to be your graduated transition value scale. And your bottom scale is going to be your graduated transition density value scale. So go ahead and label your scales as such. And then we are going to create a smooth transition at the top, so we don't want these lines showing in between. So we're not going to erase them completely, but we're going to lighten them up. And because you drew them pretty light to begin with, when you lighten them up, it shouldn't take much, okay? So because this is graduated, it's okay if the lines are a little bit between them, right? But up here, you don't want the lines between. Okay. So prep your scales, and then I'm going to move the camera up close to start the drawing. I've moved the camera up closer, right? And there's a couple of things I want to address before you start drawing. I've asked you guys to get a variety of different grades of pencil, okay? What I have here is a 6B, a 4B, a B, an H, a 4H, and a 6H, okay? So you are required to get 6 different grades of pencil. I want you to have a 6B. You have a choice of having a 4B or a 5B or a 3B. Here you have a choice of having a B or a 2B. Here you have a choice of having an H or a 2H. Here a 4H or a 3H, and then a 6H. Okay, so that is all listed in the materials list that are required, okay, for graphite pencils. If you try to do the course with one grade of pencil, it's gonna affect your grade, because I'm gonna require you to do your low key, darker value drawings with the B pencils and your high key, lighter value drawings with your H pencils. Okay, so you have to have 6 different grades of pencils in this class. It's a beginning drawing class, and the basis of drawing is graphite. And so it's important that you invest in at least 6 different grades of pencils. I recommend the whole set so you understand how the different grades feel, what they look like, and how they interact together. But to save you some money, I've cut the requirement down in half. Okay, so again, we're going to start off with the darker end of the scale. And what happened when I used my 6B and pressed really hard is I got my tip pretty blunt. So I'm going to have to sharpen my pencil. Okay, when you sharpen your pencil, do it over a trash can. Okay, so do you see that? That's a pretty sharp pencil. So I'm going to come in here and start drawing in or shading in my 6B, my darkest value. And I want you to go all the way to the edge. And because this is a smooth transition, I'm not going to create a sharp line where the first inch ends. No grain of the paper should be showing. Okay, so keep layering it until you get rid of the grains of the paper. So see how I'm changing directions and adding multiple layers? Okay, so that's going to be your darkest value right there. And now I'm going to transition, a smooth transition into the next value. Adding layers. I might have to stop and sharpen my pencil. So I don't want the second square to be as dark as the first, but I also don't want it to be too light. And there has to be a smooth transition. So you're blending with the pencil, you're blending in the darkest value with the next value to the right of it. So I'm lightening up my pressure now. I'm still using the 6B and I'm lightening up my pressure. I'm going to go into the third square. And create the transition with the 6B. But then I'm going to switch over to the 4B. So now I'm going to switch over to the 4B. So the 4B is still a darker, soft, darker graphite, but it's not as dark as the 6B. It's not as soft as the 6B. And I'm just going to keep adding layers. I'm not pressing as hard. So it's really important that you don't press hard with the 4B because it is, even though it's still soft, it's quite a bit harder than a 6B. And if you press really hard, it'll start to create undulations in the paper. So I'm still adding layers and changing directions. I'm going to get the whole square. And then I'm going to pass over into the next square, keeping my pressure light. My pressure's pretty light. And then I'm just going to layer up. Okay, so I'm going to keep adding layers to create that transition. And I'm going to go ahead into the next square over because this is too big of a transition, and I'm still going to add layers here to blend in that transition. Okay. So I'm going to lightly go into the next square before I transition to from the 4B to the B pencil. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to my B pencil, which is harder. It's a B pencil, so it's still a soft graphite, but it's harder than the 4B. So you don't want to press hard. It's a very it's kind of a hard tip. Even though it's a B pencil and it's softer than the H pencils, it's still pretty hard tip. And if you press really hard, you're going to create bevels and undulations in the paper. And you see how I'm just going back over some of the values that I already had to fill in some of the grains just to kind of blend it in a little bit smoother. So you can layer up different grades of graphite to get smoother transitions. It's also the grain, the camera's up really close. So when I pull the camera away, when it's not such a close-up shot, you'll see less, the grain of the paper will stick out less than. Okay, so I'm using really light pressure here. And I'm going to kind of transition really super light pressure before I switch over to my H pencil. Now, you're going to notice a jump, a big jump from the B to the H. Okay. The H pencil is quite a bit harder than the B pencil, so I'm going to overlap some of those middle values with the H pencil, as well as bringing the H pencil into these lighter squares on the scale. And it helps to keep switching directions. I'm kind of rushing, right? Because it's just a value scale. So if you take your time, you can get tighter marks. So this is my B pencil. Now I'm going to transition. I'm going to go a little bit past, and I'm going to transition into my, this was my H pencil. I'm going to transition now to my 4H pencil. And my 4H pencil is quite a bit harder than my H pencil, so I still want to go light in the pressure, but because it's such a hard lead, going light in the pressure is a little bit easier to maintain. And we're going to do the final square with the 6H. Now I'm transitioning to my 6H, which is my lightest value before we get to the white of the paper. Okay. The entire square is going to be 6H, right? So we'll leave the white of the paper as just the border space and the negative space in between the scales. Okay, so that's your smooth transition scale. Your graduated transition scale is going to have clear a clear difference between the dark and the next value over.